He said, ball's in the air at 7 a.m. 2 minutes of 6. I'm going around the bed. I hear a knock on the door. I open the door, and there's the President of the United States. I knew it was him because he had a robe on that said President of the United States.
Just in case
and
there's any confusion.
Yeah, and he had coffee with him.
Nice.
So I thought he did something. That was the way he was.
Welcome to the Gies Download, a podcast from the University of Illinois' Gies College of Business. I'm Tim Sinclair, and today we're talking with Sam Skinner, a name that is no doubt familiar to some. Not only is Sam a Gies accounting alum, a lawyer, and former U.S. attorney, but he also served as Secretary of Transportation and White House Chief of Staff for President George H.W. Bush. But, as is the case for most, that wasn't necessarily the goal heading into college.
I'd be curious to know, when you first set foot here at Illinois, what was the goal, or what was the thought that you were going to do after a 4-year stint here at Illinois?
Well, I had never not visited the school at all, and I came down with my mom to be delivered to campus, so to speak, a week before school started, 1956, and for pledging, fraternity pledging. And my mom and I looked around the campus, and she said, "It's beautiful." And she pointed to the third floor and said, "I think your room's up there. I'll see you at Thanksgiving," and drove off. So my first trip was a trip where my mom kind of let go and let me be on my own for the first time in my life. So fortunately, I did pledge a fraternity, the Pi Kappa Alpha, and they took me under their wing. But I was a law student when I came in here. I was in the Commerce and Law program. I always wanted to be a lawyer. Grew up in Springfield, Illinois. Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer. I was a lawyer. So all my life I still practice law many years later. So but business was a way to get there. 3 years commerce, then you go to law school. 4th year, you get your degree in commerce. And then after 2 more years, you get your law degree. But when I got to campus, it became obvious to me that I talked to my fraternity brothers that there was another option to get my law degree, and that was to get my accounting degree, fulfill my military obligation, to go to night law school in DePaul in Chicago so I could get my law degree. So that was my first experience here. Never been to campus. Went to business school and took off. And my fraternity brothers were both accounting majors. So they suggested I get accounting, and I did what my fraternity brothers said to do. And I was accounting major and had some great classes, great times. Dean Zimmerman was a good friend of mine, and several others were just really close in the accounting department.
If you had had different fraternity brothers, do you think you would have ended up with a different major? Like they studied
No.
accountancy.
Yeah, no, I think I probably would have. I'm not sure what would have happened. It's a great question. It happened for a reason, I guess. They were both accounting majors. They both had military obligations. They both were in ROTC, and I was looking for a role model. I was the oldest of my brothers. There were just 2 of us, and I was the older one. So I was looking for older brothers. So I took their advice, and it was great advice.
We'll come back to your time at Illinois, but you went through the military, got your law degree, and then before you got involved in the public sector, went the private route for a while. Was there a decision between the two? Was that the natural course of events?
No, it's interesting. Recruiting at Illinois was very important, and it started in the fall and went through the spring. And so my senior year, I was recruited by the accounting firm. Several accounting firms had offers from them. And at the last moment in the spring, before I made the final decision, I decided, well, I don't know why, to take an interview with IBM. And I went into the meeting with IBM, and they talked about being sales trainee and everything else. And I came out of that meeting and said, that's where I belong. And so I declined the offers from accounting and joined IBM for lesser money, but it was a world-class company. I could just feel the people that I was talking to, that this may be a better fit. And I went on my gut, and it was the right move for me.
You were there 8 years
8 years.
So.
I was 8 years at IBM, night law school for 6 of the 8, 4 nights a week at DePaul, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.
What led to leaving private and going into the public sector?
When I graduated from law school, I was looking at going into the private practice in Chicago, interviewed with a lot of the firms, but they weren't really interested in me because, I had a good record at IBM. It was non-law. And the firms were looking for younger lawyers. They graduated, 23, 24. I was 30 at the time. And by chance, I'd heard about the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Federal Prosecutor's Office. And I got interested in that. I'd been a junior deputy sheriff in Springfield, Illinois, where I grew up. And I'd had a great respect for law enforcement. So I decided to go for that job while working at IBM. I applied for the job, didn't get it. And then IBM interviewed me for a job in New York. And I told them I just can't move my family and 3 kids to New York. And they said, what do you want to do? And the general counsel had been with Bobby Kennedy in the Justice Department. And I said, I want to be an assistant U.S. attorney in Chicago. He said, well, where's that stand? I said, well, I'm trying to get through, but they're not taking my calls. They're not answering. At that time, it was basically all people sponsored by wards in Chicago. I think I was the first non-sponsored person to get a job there in many years. But he said, well, then I'll call my friend Warren Christopher, who was the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. And he wrote a letter on my behalf to the new U.S. Attorney.
That's a good one to have.
Yeah, and the new U.S. Attorney called me in and said, he said, oh, it's good to see you. And I said, yeah, I've been trying to get in here for 2 years. He said, when do you want to start? I said, well, don't you want to interview me? He said, no. He said, I got a letter from the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. I saw your record. I have 2 choices. I can tell him no. I do not want to start out with the Deputy Attorney General getting a no from me. When do you start? So he started me in practice in the fall of '68,
Wow.
joined the office. And then because the office was shorthanded and new people came in and Senator Percy changed the process, I stayed there for 8 years. Thought I was going to go 3 and back to practice law somewhere. Stayed 8 years, and 2 years as U.S. Attorney. And then with the change of administration, I joined Sidley in Austin.
Your career has taken lots of twists and turns. I'm sure that would be a fairly accurate, maybe understated statement. How did you get from that first job, from Warren Christopher's letter, to sitting in the White House?
Well, I joined the office in '68. In '71, a new U.S. Attorney came in, Bill Bauer from DuPage County. He brought a first assistant and then James R. Thompson, who later became our governor. And we became very close. We tried the very important case, the Kerner case, before a U.S. Circuit judge that was being tried. And he was my sponsor and helper. And then he made me U.S. Attorney it's the first assistant U.S. Attorney when he became U.S. Attorney. And then he introduced me. After he left, I became U.S. Attorney. And after I left the office in 77, Jim was still governor then, and he was having presidential candidates come through. And he asked me to come to Springfield and meet some of the candidates. And one of the candidates I met was George Herbert Walker Bush. I liked him. I liked what I saw there, all of it. And Jim Baker was sitting next to me. And I didn't know who Jim Baker even was. And 2 days later, he called and said, will you help us out? And he said, we're not doing well in Illinois. I said, well, one of your problems is Ronald Reagan you're running against is from Illinois. So he said, well, will you help us out? And I said, yeah, I really like what I saw. And so I helped him out there. And then from that moment on, whenever he became vice president, then George Herbert Walker Bush became vice president. Whenever he came through the state, he would have me be his point person through the state. I was practicing law at the time at Sidley in Austin. And then in '88, when we're running in the campaign, George W. Bush comes in, the 43rd president, and he said, what are you going to do, kid, when we win? Now, I'm older than he is, but
Sure.
he's the kind of way he is. And I said, well, we're going to win first. And he said, no, you don't understand. They're lining up already. My dad wants to bring some people in from outside Washington, and you ought to think about it. So after talking to him and a couple other people, we decided I would at least submit my name. I told Governor Thompson that I might be interested in it. And of course, he was a great mentor to me and great friend. So in 1988, we won Illinois. We got a call from the vice president, now president-elect, George Herbert Walker Bush. And he said, I told these guys you were going to carry Illinois, and we did. And he said, I got to go now, guys. I'm going in to see the president. He's now the president-elect. And Jim said to him, I want one more thing I want you to do. He said, what's that? He said, I want you to consider Sam for Secretary of Transportation. Oh, I love Sam. That was it. Next thing I know, 2 months later, I got a call. The vice president would like to see me. And I called in. He said, we want you to do this transportation thing. And I said, you want me to drive for you? He said, you know what I mean.
Right.
And that became a relationship that over 4 years, both as DOT and then as chief of staff.
All right, let's go back now to Illinois before we get to some of the big stuff. Obviously, to become those different things, chief of staff and head of transportation, like, how did Illinois and your education and then your career prepare you to do those jobs? Because it feels like obviously in a 5-minute story, a giant jump or a giant leap for somebody, but I know there's 20 or 30 years in there.
First of all, it laid a solid foundation for me as a person. My dad had died. I was young, and it was so I came to Illinois unprepared for school, unprepared for anything, and because of the fraternity and the discipline of Gies, it wasn't Gies at the time. The discipline that was required in my classes, that's what I needed, and I did pretty well in accounting. I think I was second in my pledge class, and so that made me feel comfortable. So it gave me a feeling of comfort. I mean, the professors were tremendous. We had a personal relationship, and I bonded. And I had a military obligation, but I was interested in the military anyway. Had the ROTC program, which was mandatory at the time, and I decided to stay and get commissioned. All of that laid a base. Coming out of a great business school with a great degree, with some military experience I wouldn't have had, and all of a sudden, when I came back to work at IBM, I had the tools necessary to survive in a very competitive but very warm environment for 8 years.
You start working in Washington, and now you've got gigantic things that you have to deal with and oversee. The Valdez and
Yeah.
The earthquakes in Northern California. First of all, what did you bring to the table? What kind of mindset were you looking
Well,
at those through that would have been different than
my
others?
guess is, first of all, I was an outsider, so I'm not stuck in the bureaucracy. Number two, I like to keep busy in action, and I was a successful salesman at IBM, convincing very big companies to do the right thing on computers and everything. So I felt comfort in that. And in U.S. Attorney, I had basically ran the office. We had 80 lawyers when I left, and that gave me confidence. By the time I was ready to go to Washington, I knew, but the most important thing I did, I got to recruit my own people. And the first thing I did was get a chief of staff who knew the Department of Transportation. Second most important thing was I hired somebody to be my assistant secretary for government affairs that was very familiar with the Hill. And those two things, I could hit the street running. And then I went out and, thanks to President Bush's policy, were able to hire the very best people I could. I looked for them all over the country, brought them in with no political sponsorship at all. Head of highways, the FAA administrator, were all people best in class that I brought in to work for me. So then it was easy. Just be yourself. Just take care of the people. I was a risk taker. Obviously, I wouldn't have left IBM to take a job at an 80% pay cut or taking a job at IBM for a 25% pay cut.
Yeah.
I was a calculated risk taker. But a lot of people in government, the bureaucracy, don't like to take risks. They'll follow you. Don't take it. So when I'm ready to take the risks and make a decision, they'll follow me.
One of my favorite sayings is, I'd rather fail at greatness than succeed at mediocrity.
Yeah.
And I know you love instilling words of wisdom in today's students, whether it's here at Gies or other places you get a chance to go. What are some of the things when you get an audience of young people that you want to make sure they know and they remember as they move out into the rest of their life?
Number one rule is associate yourself with good people. They will bring you up. Associate with bad people, they'll bring you down. It's the organization you join. Make sure you associate yourself with good people. They're good. Number two, try to understand, and integrity is everything, and your reputation is everything. So don't make a decision that you're going to lose sleep over. Make a decision that you can sleep well under. Number three, life is perfect. You're going to have some ups and some downs. When you have downs, put them in the rearview mirror. Don't let them take over your life for indefinite future. Number four, understand and be humble, or at least respect that you're very fortunate and you have an obligation to do something for someone else because of where you came, coming out of Gies, coming out of a great program at IBM, training program, and then number five, make sure that if you need help, get help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Make sure you appreciate that you got help, and understand that you got to have team players. You got to have help, and to recognize the people that you're working with, to take care of them on your way up, and then compartmentalizing so you don't try to do too much. And if they got some bad things happening, then put those aside and work on the good ones, but don't let it consume your life.
Somebody told me before we got a chance to meet that you were big on recognizing the people in the organization for their accomplishments and the work they do. And literally in the elevator on the way down here to these studios, you did that very thing with a maintenance worker here at Gies, recognizing them for a job well done. Why is that so important to you, and how have you seen that be an important part of what you
That
do?
was key to my success wherever I've been. Is I take care of. I'm there for them, and I recognize what they do. You can't do it alone, and you got people want to be recognized for what they're doing. They want to be appreciated. You cannot reach out enough. I had a program at DOT where I recognized people throughout the country, 110,000 employees, but people would send in recommendations, did extraordinary things. I would personally call them and congratulate them. I invited them in. We had a veterans ceremony. I invited a veteran from each agency within the department to come and be recognized in a nationally broadcast long before the internet of this recognition ceremony. I think it's absolutely key to success. And I had some amazing people with some amazing stories. But I had this little pin I gave away, the one I was talking about, the Way to Go Award. When they came up for the big award, they had their Way to Go pin, and the people recognized that. And then as you do that, you recognize it empowers you to do more because you recognize. I told somebody this story. It's not about me. It's just I learned that from others I'm working with. IBM was that way. IBM took care of everybody. I'd say the culture at IBM was, we're all in this together, and they taught me that. So I do that. I still do it, and I love doing it. And it's the right thing to do.
I would assume you have a million stories from audiences with presidents and all the different things that you've lived in your life. Is there a favorite that you like to tell that most people either find surprising or interesting? Because again, I'm sure there's just a million to choose from.
Well, I got a great story to tell about, I worked for a man who thought the same way I did. I learned from him, President George Herbert Walker Bush. He was always taking care of everybody. He had related and identified everybody. But my first visit to Kennebunkport with him as Secretary of Transportation, we go to dinner at his house, and we were staying at the cabin next to him. And he said to me at dinner, he said, "Do you want to play golf in the morning?" We both were golfers. And I said, no. He said, can you get up in the morning to play golf? I said, to get up to play golf with the President of the United States, I think I'll be up. So he then go back to his bedroom, and he's got these clocks in there to find me an alarm clock. We weren't sure it worked or not. And he gave me one. He said, "I think this works." And he said, "Ball's in the air at 7 a.m. 2 minutes of 6. I'm going around the bed. I hear a knock on the door. I open the door, and there's the President of the United States. I knew it was him because he had a robe on that said President of the United States.
Just in case
And
there
he
was
had-
any confusion.
Yeah, and he had coffee with him.
Nice.
So I thought you did something. That was the way he was.
Wow.
So when you work with somebody like that, you learn how much it's appreciated. And of course, coming from the President of the United States, he loved being around people, being associated with people from all walks of life. His best friends were fishermen and people he hunted with, and he always wanted to meet people that he could learn from.
Back to Gies now. It's been many years since you walked the halls and walked this campus, but what have you seen as the progress over the years in terms of how things are now, the future of Gies College of Business in your ability to gather that
I am
kind of stuff?
absolutely blown away the condition of the campus and the way Gies feels. It is. My wife and I came down for a veterans ceremony not too long ago, and as soon as we got out of the car at the airport, we said, "Oh my God, this place is beautiful." And then we got over to Gies. I come in here regularly, and I see the school, I see the students, I see the class. One thing that I think about, and it's not CLAS that you're going to, it's capital CLAS, which Gies has. Everything world class, from the way that the buildings are maintained, the way people are treated, the kind of people that are associated with. This is a great school and a great organization and a great university. And it's just getting better. And so I think the new dean is phenomenal. I'm a big fan of hers. Big fan of the other dean as well. I think the staff she's got around her are great. She has a mission that she wants to go forward with to take us to the next level. Because these are not people that are status quo people. The leaders of the school want to take it to number one. We're number 2 or 3. We want to be number 1. We want to be best in breed, best in class. And that's what we're striving for. And that's what we're doing with the student body. I mean, we got the quality. You only can take 700 students. We need to upgrade that to get more students out there. And everywhere I go, when they went to Gies, first thing they say, I went to Gies. They're very proud to have been at Gies.
What gives you hope or encouragement for the next generation of leaders, whether it be in the public or the private sector, that you have seen leaving here and making their way into the working world?
Great question. That is a great question, because you got a skill set that we were training for in 1960. It's not the same skill set we're training for today, and you got to stay current with that. We've got AI, we've got technology, we've got all kind of needs. We've got companies that are recognized that we didn't even heard of, and the companies that were big then are no longer in the business. So we're training for the future. We're not training for the past. We're training for the future. And we're using technology, and we're using teachers, and we're using skill sets and to have mentors to help students prepare for the future. And that involves technology, that involves the way we do business, how we use our resources. And I think they're on the cutting edge there. There's a reason that this school is thought so well of all over the country. It's because they're on the cutting edge. And we've also, we're training for the world too. So it's a great, we have an obligation, because now our brand is not just going to be carried out to the U.S. These students here at Gies are going to go all over the world, and that's how we'll be recognized. To be a world-class university, you got to have those relationships. And people there, I think, we're happy the way they're treated here, the way they're educated here, the way they're given opportunity here, and the way they are blessed, so to speak, to go out into the world and return to their countries and make a difference.
Be sure to join us for the next Gies Download. In the meantime, you can learn more about the Gies College of Business at giesbusiness.illinois.edu.